creates questions the human mind cannot answer. Out of reach, past all we can see, hear, and touch, beyond all we understand, lies the extraordinary.
It's just nature is such a strong force. And I think that force itself makes things disappear.
The extraordinary is the disappearance of this yacht from the face of the earth. The vessel and all aboard vanished without a trace.
We didn't get one bit of material, whether it was a life jacket or a piece of flotsam or jetsam or a seat cushion, nothing. So we just don't know what happened. It's quite a mystery.
The boat's graveyard. The Bermuda Triangle. It is the vision of another world that played an important part in the life of the star of Mannix, Mike Connors.
We keep coming back until we get it right. But when you finally get it right, you don't come back.
The extraordinary is the strange ability of this American woman to communicate with creatures great and small.
She says her nutrition isn't just right. She says she doesn't know enough about that to discuss it, but she knows that it's lacking.
She's known as Mrs. Doolittle. She talks with the animals, and they talk back. The extraordinary is the story of a tiny baby who wasn't supposed to make it. He was weak, his color gray, his future bleak.
I saw them picking up this little, just pale blue, spindly baby. And I was just thinking, live, Ian, live. Because you could tell that baby was not well.
But no one counted on the courage or the brilliant mind of this young man.
My God, there is such a thing as miracle.
Just some of the stories that lie beyond our normal understanding. Tonight on The Extraordinary.
A remarkable man, Ian Hudson. Good evening. I'm Warwick Moss. Like all the others, the 40-foot sailing boat Freedom disappeared without a trace. Like so many of the missing captains of all the missing yachts during the past 50 years, Freedom skipper Charles Muir was vastly experienced on the seas of the Caribbean. But like all of them, when he set off from the Bahamas on March 12 with his wife and 2 guests, he got swept north by a strong wind, up the Gulf Stream, toward the Bermuda Triangle.
The yacht, named Charlie's Crab, sailed easily on a turquoise sea on a calm day in March. It carried on board Charles Muir, an exceptional man others looked to as living proof that any challenge could be conquered and the American dream could come true. His magnetism had helped him take a lone seafood restaurant in Detroit and build an empire of Charlie's Crab outlets across America. In his world of business, in his family of 7 children, in his adventures, and especially on his yacht, Charles Muir seemed invincible, the type of guy who could live forever. On this day, Muir, his wife Betty, and 2 friends, George and Lynn Drummy, set out on a 12-hour sail from the Bahama Islands west to the Florida coast.
The weather was absolutely gorgeous, and the wind was blowing from east to west, like 15, 20 knots. And knowing my dad the way he figured it, that would be like a 10-hour sail, and they would just put up the spinnaker and blast to Palm Beach and be there, by Saturday morning.
In perfect weather, ahead of a perfect breeze, the yacht Charlie's Crab was about to sail into oblivion. He had always hoped he would go at sea.
He used to always tell me that he was gonna, when it was time for him to go, he was gonna sail out in the ocean and let the water take him.
But this was not supposed to be the day. The shock at his loss came not just because he seemed indestructible, nor that he was a prominent American. After all, he went down in a lightning-quick storm of such ferocity that waves rose 20 feet high. The more disturbing element was where he disappeared, the Bermuda Triangle. And the fact that Charlie's crab, including all of those on board, and every piece of equipment, including sails that float, all of it had disappeared without a trace.
We didn't get one bit of material, whether it was a life jacket or a piece of flotsam or jetsam or a seat cushion, nothing. So we just don't know what happened. It's quite a mystery.
It is a tragedy that has for many reopened the questions that have gone unanswered for almost 50 years about the graveyard of ships and planes off America's east coast. The search for any sign of Charlie's crab in the days after its disappearance was the biggest exercise at sea since the space shuttle Columbia fell from the sky. Backed by the Coast Guard, drug enforcement planes, a fleet of private craft funded by the Muir family, and a volunteer force sparked by a $100,000 reward, it was an operation that covered every square inch of 100,000 square miles.
We found nothing at all. No sign of the vessel, no sign of life jackets, nothing, not a shred. No one in the Coast Guard likes to search and not find who you're looking for. We know that these people are probably lost at sea forever. It really saddens us.
Like so many disappearances of ships and planes in the past half-century, the so-called Devil's Triangle had delivered up no remains of its victims. From the afternoon of December 5th, 1945, when 5 U.S. Navy Avenger planes took off from a Florida airbase and disappeared, and was searched for by a Marine seaplane, which also disappeared, the absoluteness of the disappearances has fueled the Bermuda Triangle legend. We'll take a look at the list of those other mysteries a little later, but Muir's daughter Susan admits that despite the freak storm, there are nagging thoughts.
And I think when you have such a big, expansive ocean, you are going to always have the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle, because things will not come up, and things will be engulfed and they'll be gone forever. And my parents are one of them.
It is difficult for Susan and anyone who knew her father to come to grips with his death. Charles Muir had survived many encounters that might crush other men. Captaining the Charlie's Crab with family on board, he had once withstood a tidal wave.
It rose to about 40, 45 feet, and it's a beautiful day, and they just heard something, and they turned around, and they got nailed by it. And the Coast Guard called me at home to tell me my parents were lost at sea, and that scared me for a while until they found them.
This had been the first occasion the Coast Guard recorded Charles Muir lost at sea. And the experience left his family and friends with the feeling that Charlie would always come home. If anything, it had made him a safer sailor.
I know it changed my mom, but I know it changed my dad, because my dad always thought twice before he'd take the sailboat out.
He was not a great risk taker in terms of that. He was very concerned and aware of what the dangers were out on the water.
But on the morning of March 12th, there seemed nothing to fear in the waters just north of Bimini in the Bahamas. It was just another in a succession of perfect sailing days. A drug enforcement agency reconnaissance plane, on lookout for smugglers, took this routine photograph from overhead at 2:45 p.m.
I think all of them are sitting around. You can see my dad standing there staring. They had no idea.
When we spotted them in the middle of the afternoon on that Friday, they were headed in the direction of West Palm Beach. What we don't know is whether after that photo was taken, they stopped anywhere en route.
Even as the aerial photo was snapped, a rogue storm was whipping up to the south, unknown to the Charlie's Crab. It was a storm which that night would wreak havoc in the Gulf Stream and pound the Florida coast with 130-kilometer winds. The Muir children knew about it but they knew Charlie too. They had little concern. But on Saturday morning, the Charlie's Crab had not arrived in the designated port of Jupiter, Florida. Then Sunday came. And Monday, still no sign. Fears ranged from the unknown powers of the Bermuda Triangle to even more dramatic scenarios.
There's been a lot of talk about whether or not the boat had been pirated. I've had people call and say they think that they were being held prisoner in Cuba. But a newspaper person just called and asked me if it was true that our family had hired a detective, because we felt that there was something else had gone on.
The massive search covered 30,000 square miles the first day, and for a week more than 100 planes scoured the triangle formed by Bermuda, Palm Beach, and the Bahamas. And then, 5 days into the search, the children of Charlie Muir learned something that brought a grave yet mysterious twist to their hopes. A check with Florida's cellular records showed that 2 calls had been made to the police 911 emergency line from their father's portable phone at 4:20 on the morning after they disappeared. Each call disconnected before an operator could answer. The Charlie's Crab, its Captain Courageous Charles Muir, his wife, and guests were never heard from again.
It was yet another mysterious disappearance of ships and planes in the Bermuda Triangle in the past 5 decades. We'll take a closer look at the graveyard they call the Devil's Triangle in just a minute. The larger-than-life American restaurant tycoon Charles Muir and the others on board his yacht disappeared off the face of the earth in a triangle of ocean that has claimed ships and planes throughout this century. Like many of the others, the vessel and all aboard vanished completely, leaving no debris.
The 7 children of Charles and Betty Muir were forced to give up hope in the invincibility of their father during the months that followed the disappearance of the Charlie's Crab. They looked to the sea off the Florida coast now only for an understanding of the forces that took them away.
I don't know. I just know that there's a lot of unanswered questions in the Bermuda Triangle, and I think it has to do with a lot of the weather conditions and other patterns that develop within it that are either interplanetary or I don't know. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of weird stuff that does happen.
Whether taken by the simple power of a storm at sea or some other element that left not a single trace, the case has refocused wide attention to the body of ocean that's claimed hundreds before. Some authors claim the legend dates back to the days of Christopher Columbus in 1492. But its impact on this century clearly intensified on the afternoon of December 5th, 1945. 5 U.S. Navy Avengers took off from a South Florida base on a training mission and practice bombing raid in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. 4 trainee pilots flew in formation behind Squadron Leader Lieutenant Charles Taylor. The flight plan was to go southwest back to Fort Lauderdale. The mission went according to plan until about 15 minutes before they were due to land. And suddenly, in clear weather, a confused radio message from Lieutenant Taylor. "We cannot see land. We cannot see land. We seem to be lost. We're not sure of our position. We don't know which way is west." The 5 planes were never seen or heard from again. The Navy and Air Force mounted the biggest search of its kind in the area's history and found no trace. But that wasn't all. 27 lives would be lost this day. For almost immediately after the radio distress call, a Navy Mariner seaplane took off in search. While over the Triangle, the Mariner too lost radio contact, and it too vanished without a trace. Since then, authorities have chronicled a mind-boggling record of disappearances, both before and after 1945, ranging from huge cargo vessels, tankers, schooners, and small yachts at sea, to military and private planes in the air. Many of the disasters are explained by bad weather, and many are not. In 1925, the Japanese ship Reifuku Maru disappeared moments after its captain radioed in broken English, "Now very danger, come quick." In 1947, the British Star Tiger airliner disappeared with all on board. In 1957, Harvey Conover, his wife, daughter, and son-in-law set sail up the coast on a course always in sight of land in their yacht, Revenuk. The boat and all aboard vanished without a trace. In 1963, 11 men were lost when 2 Air Force Stratotanker planes took off from Homestead Base in Florida and became the first jet aircraft to fall to the legend of the Devil's Triangle. In 1967, the cabin cruiser Witchcraft, captained by Miami hotelier Dan Burak, with his friend, Father Patrick Horgan, aboard, disappeared only a mile offshore. They had gone out on calm water to look at Miami's Christmas lights in a boat with supposedly unsinkable flotation chambers. Burak radioed his vessel had struck a submerged object. Though just offshore, neither the men nor any piece of the Witchcraft was ever seen again. Charlie Muir's children don't know what happened to their parents. If the Bermuda Triangle doesn't have supernatural forces at work, it certainly has some of the world's most powerful natural elements.
It's just nature is such a strong force. And I think that force itself makes things disappear. It makes things happen.
After the earlier tidal wave that hit the Charlie's Crab, her mother Betty wasn't especially keen to go to sea again.
She didn't feel safe on the boat anymore because she saw what could happen. But because of my dad's love, she knew that the only way to see my dad on vacation sometimes was to go with him.
The Muir children's last image of her, though, is happy. That aerial photo, when enhanced, shows her smiling and relaxed on the deck of the sailboat. And Susan has another memory of the last time she saw her mother on land.
And it was her birthday, her 55th birthday. And we had a surprise party for her all set up. She got to see everybody, and she got to see her parents. And her best friend was there, Lynn, and the kids and everything. So I feel real good about it.
And the memory of her father's longtime wish.
He used to always tell me that when it was time for him to go, he was going to sail out in the ocean and let the water take him.
Another victim of the infamous Bermuda Triangle? Could be. Back with more in a moment. You may remember Mike Connors from a lot of TV shows in the 70s. He was a private eye called Mannix, and he has a reputation as one of the quietest, nicest guys in Hollywood. We caught up with Mike in Beverly Hills the other day and found a man with his feet quietly fixed on the ground and some definite thoughts on the meaning of life.
Look, Mr. Diamond, this is not just a missing person case anymore.
I told you I didn't want any police when we started all this.
You told me a lot of things, Mr. Diamond, including a pack of lies. I want to know what really happened on Friday.
I told you that this morning.
As Mannix, he was tough when he needed to be tough. But just beneath the surface, no matter what kind of fix he was in, Mannix always gave you the sense that things would turn out okay. In this world, what will be. And the good guys always win to be back the same time next week. And it was the same sense of fate or destiny that Mike Connors says got him into the acting business in the first place. It just sort of happened when he was at school one day. He was something of a basketball star, and Hollywood was a long way away.
The last thing I ever thought in my life would be I'd be an actor. I was from a small town. The most I knew about an actor is when they came through on a train from Los Angeles to San Francisco or going east to promote a picture, and you looked at them and waved. That was another world. That was something that was far from me. But the fact that there was a director sitting at a basketball game that asked me if I was interested in acting, and a few days later, a casting lady called the coach and asked him if there was an athlete there that might replace the present Tarzan. And he said, well, there was a fella here that a director was interested in. So I went and saw her, and she said, you're not right for Tarzan, but have you ever thought about acting? So I suddenly said, Destiny, something's telling me I should maybe get into the entertainment field. And it happened. I believe in fate. I believe that there are certain things that we're all destined for or are going to happen. You can't sit back and say, do it to me. You got to make them happen. But I believe that in the long run, there's some kind of a form to life, whether it be God that has created it, that I believe that our little niches are all kind of cut out for us. I sometimes say, why, if there is a God and we believe in God, why does he allow those things to happen? Why is the nicest person you've ever known killed accidentally or is struck with cancer? Why does that happen to the person that least deserves it? I don't know, but there must be some kind of a scheme.
Connors says his father had a great influence on his life and gave him the foundation for most of his beliefs in the hereafter, superstition, and reincarnation.
My father was an attorney, was well respected. Everybody in this small town of Fresno respected him. He was not financially successful because it was more important to him to help people, whether they could afford it or not. And in those days, I remember on a Sunday, and we lived right across the street from a church, on a Sunday morning, you'd walk out and there would be a watermelon, a dead chicken plucked ready for cooking, vegetables. That's how the people paid him for his legal advice and help. And I remember my mother saying, but I can't buy shoes and pants for the kids with watermelons and grapefruits and peaches. And he said, it's more important to help people and be happy. So to me, success was being able to help people. I found out over the years he knew the Bible better than most of those Sunday churchgoers every week. He knew it, and he studied it, and he believed in it, and he lived it. And he always said, when I said, well, how can you know so much about the Bible? And I never see you going to church. And he said, well, going and sitting in church, to me, is not religion. What is religion is what you practice every day with people. I'd like to believe in a hereafter. I'd also think that there's something to say about reincarnation. I think maybe we keep coming back until we get it right. But when you finally get it right, you don't come back. It's hard not to believe in reincarnation because when you see a 4-year-old kid sit at a piano and play Chopin or Brahms, or you see some young genius at the age of 4, and you say, how could that be unless someplace in another life he was a famous pianist or a musician or an artist? What other explanation is there? Is the brain that complicated that a person grows up that? I don't know. I've got to think that in a past life that person has had that experience before.
He was a tiny baby who came into the world after 12 hours of labor. He was weak, starved of oxygen, and his pallor was as grey as the life ahead of him. He wasn't supposed to make it, and if he did, the doctors predicted cerebral palsy and mental retardation. For the first 6 years of his life, the doctors seemed to be right, but they didn't know the inner strength or the brilliant mind of a boy called Ian Hudson.
I can't breathe anymore. The pain was very, very severe, but I thought it was me. I never thought there would be anything amiss with the baby.
Even though Helen was in tremendous labor pains, Helen's a stoic, and she was really suffering.
It is the night of July 28th, 1983. The woman about to give birth does not know she is a month overdue. Her life is in danger. Her unborn son's life is in danger. A nurse had turned them away from a hospital and given the wrong advice.
We arrived at the hospital at 3:30. The nurse looked at Helen, decided that she really wasn't going to be giving birth imminently.
They examined me and found I wasn't dilated, and so said, go home. And going home was an hour and a half away through the mountains.
In the only available rundown motel, mother and child are in growing distress.
We should have stayed at the hospital.
She's in a lot of pain. I really think that she's going to have this baby now. I'm going to bring her in.
Later this day, at the hospital, more mistakes will be made. The chances of death grow with each moment.
Doctor would come, check heartbeat. We're not told that his heartbeat dropped down a couple times early in the morning.
Even though there were very clear and tangible signs that Ian was in distress from probably about 9:30 on, nothing was done.
But against all the worst medical decisions, against the certainty that everything that could go wrong would go wrong, a beautiful, beautiful child would be born. The remarkable Ian Jeffrey Hudson.
When I saw the little blue-white hand come out of Helen's belly, and then I saw them pick Ian up, this little, just pale blue, spindly baby, and I was just thinking, live, Ian, live, because you could tell that baby was not well. I mean, just, the baby couldn't get a breath.
I saw Ian then that evening, and I was just amazed at how beautiful he was, how his eyes looked so understanding.
He just had this beautiful big head and blonde hair and these just eyes that wouldn't quit. And he just was very quiet, but attentive, looking out in the world. And a doctor who was attending said that it seemed like he was unusually observant.
Ian Hudson would be a special boy. Blonde, happy, alert, bright. He would fulfill every expectation his parents, Mark and Helen, dreamed for in the days after their close call with tragedy.
For the first couple of months, we felt like we were coming out of the woods. And we felt like, by God, there is such a thing as miracle. And we felt incredibly hopeful and incredibly excited.
But Ian would be special in ways they didn't expect. He would grow into a medical wonder, a child in a million. Forget his appearance. Today, Ian Hudson has one of the most brilliant 10-year-old minds in America. He has been a star student in the advanced learning class of Margaret Zimmerman.
He spelled all kinds of words that not even my students normally, as 6-year-olds, could spell.
Jenny Froge was Ian's class assistant since his first day.
He amazes me every day that I work with him, because every time I think I know everything there is about Ian, he does one more thing that's different or one more thing that shows how much intelligence he really has.
Entry into the world had been traumatic for Ian Hudson. He was born by emergency cesarean, weighing only 5.5 pounds. Grey from oxygen starvation, he came out fighting for dear life and every breath. He was flown by helicopter to another hospital in Spokane, Washington, and hooked up to a ventilator. Yet in survival, he had looked so beautiful, his eyes so bright. Only in the days of recovery did reality come down on the Hudsons with cruel finality.
We just sort of held each other in each other's arms and just wept.
I remember from that night thinking, no matter who Ian is, he will never hurt anyone. If this is somebody who can never grow up and never know anything, he will never hurt anyone.
The doctors informed Mark and Helen their baby boy would have cerebral palsy and probably be severely mentally retarded for life.
When you hear words like that, it's like you can't think. It's like you can't even sort of imagine how you're going to live the next minute of your life. And I just hung up the phone and just sort of sat there.
When he was a very small baby, 2 months old, we'd hold him in front of mirrors all the time, and we watched him watch himself. And that, again, we had never had a normal child, but we thought, this is how babies tell us that they're in there. And he would look at pictures, and he would watch with his eyes. And I said, this kid's in there, and he knows.
Helen saw it in the alertness, that special spark in his sky blue eyes. They seemed to notice every word, every movement around him.
What do you do with a kid that can't move, can't get around? You read a lot. You sit in the chair and you read him books and you show him books. We didn't actively teach him to read, but clearly he learned to read very well by the time he was 3.
Yet medical evaluations of Ian's IQ said he was way below average intelligence for his age. At 3, he went to a school for the severely disabled, and it was immediately apparent to Helen he did not belong. The proof of the true capabilities trapped inside Ian's handicapped body was about to be revealed.
One day I was just down on the floor, futzing around, put down cow and frog. Said, okay, Ian, which animal's green? And I felt it was just like this little tornado leaping out of my arms. He threw himself up into the air, onto that board, his whole body just landing on the word frog, to let me know that he knew.
Then one day in 1989, when Ian was 6, Helen and Mark Hudson reached a decision. They wanted their son educated at a regular school. A school psychologist came to the Hudson home to test his abilities.
And the school psychologist came out and figured out a way whereby Ian could communicate his answers.
Ian? How are you?
We taped letters, A, B, C, D, E, and a big fan across the living room floor. Because that's the only way Ian is going to be able to show with his pointing, right, what the answers are.
You're in Denver, and you want to go to San Francisco. Are you going to head A, north, B, east, C, west, or D, south?
I see him answer questions. I see him identify words like isthmus and oasis and follow patterns of logic faster than I could figure them out. That was very, very exciting.
Ian also spelled out with his board such words as arid, dilapidated, replenish, and talon. Before the test was finished, 6-year-old Ian Hudson was solving 2-stage math problems in 4-digit addition, subtraction, and multiplication. And when a week later the evaluation results came back, Ian had tested in the 99.9th percentile for his age in the country. Not even Mark or Helen could explain his grasp of mathematics. They could only guess he had picked up such sophisticated English and language skills from TV and listening to conversations. The evaluation not only recommended Ian go to a regular school, but be placed in an advanced class for gifted and talented children.
And if there's one point in my life when I felt like a brass ring was offered off the merry-go-round, it was that moment. And I reached for it, and I don't know what they would have had to do to dislodge this mother from getting Ian in that program.
And a new day dawned on the world of all cerebral palsy victims, one day in August 1989. Ian was wheeled into Margaret Zimmerman's class for gifted children at the Laura Hose Elementary School in Crawfordsville, Indiana. It was a moment of intense anticipation for parents, teacher, and child.
I was panicked. I have no background in working with handicapped children. As a preschool teacher, I had worked with a few, but they could still communicate. They could still move their hands and legs. So this was going to be a completely new and different experience for me.
And then I saw his eyes, and he kind of smiled, and they kind of danced, and I thought, it'll be okay. We'll make it.
I think you're going to really enjoy him, and I want everyone here to make him really welcome. Now, who would like to have Ian sit next to them?
A boy named Aaron Schaefer would be the one who broke the ice.
Hi, Ian. This is Aaron.
They would become the best of friends.
Ian really likes poetry, and he loves puns. Like in his writing, he always puts puns in, and he likes writing too.
In the 4 years since his arrival, Ian has stunned academics with his math skills and a command of the language which produced poetry like this.
Poems are nicer than letters because they have a song in them. My gift to you is the tune I write here. Listen quietly for my voice. I may quit speaking at any moment, but I can never stop singing.
In his first year at the school, Ian, Aaron, and a third student made a video project for a regional media fair. It was scripted by Ian, and it won first prize in 2 age group categories. It was called The Big Black Hole, the story of young boys who crashed through a barrier into a world where a triumphant Ian Hudson jumps from his wheelchair and runs like any healthy 10-year-old. Ian explains the video is the story of a world where everybody is equal. The only way we know to tell if our pet dog is a bit off colour is to feel its snout. The colder and wetter, the better. But here's a lady who seems to have an easier and drier way to diagnose the problem. They call her Mrs. Doolittle. And yes, she talks to the animals. Her name is Maureen Hall, and in a place like Hollywood, where producers need pets to walk, talk, act and amaze on the first take, Mrs. Hall is in demand. She can teach a horse to fetch a rose, make a pregnant goat jump on cue, ask a parrot to get the mail, do the banking, and play baseball with the kids. Unquestionably, Mrs. Hall has a way with animals.
It was simply there for me, and I didn't know how to control it. It just happened.
And her secret, she says, is, well, sort of special. She can not only talk to them and hear what they're saying to her, she can actually read their minds by telepathy.
I can receive from the animal sometimes a picture, very much like your television screen. It's just out there in front, and it's very clear, and it's in color, and it's a picture.
The day we visited her at her small animal farm just outside Los Angeles, Mrs. Hall was giving therapeutic counseling to a horse, 2 dogs, and 2 kittens. Oh, and their owners. The first patient of the day was Mihor and his concerned owner, Carol Roper. Mihor was suffering from bronchitis, pancreatitis, and a liver disorder. But not until Mrs. Hall had a personal chat with Mihor was the problem diagnosed.
She says her nutrition isn't just right. And she says she doesn't know enough about that to discuss it, but she knows that it's lacking.
Next came Portia and Wolfie and their loving owner, Jeanette Webb. Were these pussies really content?
They've been very well taken care of, and they really appreciate it. They know you really care about them. They're very well-adjusted cats emotionally, extremely well-adjusted. They have been allowed to feel good about themselves.
Jeanette had one last quick question about warding off fleas during the summer months.
Now, is there anything as summer comes that I should do to ensure that they stay away?
First flea problem is, first of all, you can talk to the fleas and ask them to leave.
Oh, right.
Then there was the revelation to Lisa Raby, owner of the pup called Jean Louise. Jean Louise confided to Mrs. Hall she was bored.
She feels like she's sort of being wasted. She said she'd like a lot more training. She would like some training that really stimulates her mind. She thinks she's very clever and that she could figure it out and do it.
And the big patient of the day, a horse called Garth. Garth's owner, Carol Roper, had a traumatic event in her street the previous week. A man was murdered. The question was, did Garth witness it from his stable?
But he heard loud voices. And it seems to me like he picked up 3 voices.
Really?
Like there were 3 people involved.
Well, that could be.
And then when the gun fired, it really scared him.
Yeah.
And he was worried first about himself, he ran. And then he was worried about you. So he called to you. He was very frightened that night. And that's really about all he knows about it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of loud voices, and it seems to him like they were coming from 3 different individuals.
It had been a long day for the lady they called Mrs. Doolittle. Time for all creatures, great and small, to pack up, settle down, put their things away, and settle in for the night. More in just a moment.
It seemed like a random murder, a crime typical of modern America, until police discovered the victim was a renowned investigator of psychic phenomena. The murder investigation led to a clue from beyond this world. The killer identified by his dead victim. An untold story. Next week.
You'll find that story most intriguing. Now I'd like to show you something else from next week. It's a story from the deep traditions and mythology of Australia. Last century, there was a man named Walter Craig and a horse called Nimblefoot. What they managed to achieve in the 1870 Melbourne Cup is now part of our folklore. And I can tell you, it's a story about far more than just horse racing. Good night. See you in the future.
Every racehorse owner hopes and thinks that he in due course will win the Melbourne Cup with a horse. In the year 1870, in February of that year, Walter Craig was sufficiently confident about his horse Nimblefoot winning the Cup that year. He took what might be described as almost a bizarre bet.
I think Nimblefoot